Hey Patricia from Casus e Mysterios. This is Oliver Cooper, who played David Berkowitz, aka the son of Sam, in the Mindhunter series for Netflix.
Oi, meus misteriosos, tudo bem com vocês? Estamos aqui para mais uma belíssima entrevista com mais um ator de Mindhunter. E dessa vez nós vamos entrevistar o ator que fez o David Berkowitz, o filho de Sam, o ator Oliver Cooper. O ator Oliver Cooper, ele participou de diversos filmes e diversas séries bem conhecidas aqui no Brasil, e eu vou mencionar algumas aqui para vocês. Vocês devem lembrar dele no filme Projeto X, que foi lançado aqui no Brasil em 2012. Ele estava bem novinho e eu duvido que vocês não lembrem desse filme. Ele fez também o filme dos Caças Fantasmas, que vai ser lançado aqui no Brasil esse ano. Ele também participou recentemente do filme Quarentena do Deserto, foi lançado no ano passado, e também ele fez o filme e participou do filme O Favorito. Ele atuou sendo o personagem Joey Tripp. Antes de eu começar a entrevista de hoje, já tô lembrando vocês que aqui no canal Casos e Mistérios, aqui tem o playlist só das entrevistas com os atores de Mindhunter. E vamos para a primeira pergunta. Oliver, como que você conseguiu o papel para a série Mindhunter?
It's pretty simple. I just auditioned for it. Actually, a friend of mine. It wasn't. Usually, I get auditions through my agent, and they'll send me stuff, and I'll read it and go, oh, yeah, I can play that, and I'll do an audition for it, and read a couple pages or a scene from the show or the movie that you're doing. And this one, a friend of mine had auditioned for it and was like, hey, I think you'd be great for this. And the first season had come out, but I actually hadn't even watched it yet. And I ended up I ended up emailing my manager and saying, hey, my friend said I'd be right for this part. Maybe I could get an audition. And I thought the name of it was Mind Hunters. I hadn't even seen the show. So then after I got the audition and I did it, and I didn't really think much of it because I just didn't think I would actually get it. It was really a cool project. And then I watched the first season. I was like, wow, this is a really good show. I'd be like so lucky to even be a part of this, and I couldn't believe it. I actually got the call back to do it, and then that's when they had me do like the full scene that you see in the show. I did that, and that was tough because I had to get so many lines down. I only had a few days to do it, and I had to obviously work on the accent because I'm not from New York, even though accent comes pretty easy to me, but it is to get it really accurately, it's tough. And so I did that, and ended up meeting with a makeup artist Kazu, who's unbelievable, and he basically did all the prosthetic makeup, and he had to do some tests, and I still didn't know if I had the job. And then eventually, maybe like a couple weeks later, I just found out, hey, you got it. And it's probably the most exciting job I've ever gotten, and just to work with David Fincher and to work on such a good show, and to work with Kazu, who's the best makeup artist in the world, and to do prosthetics and get lost in it. It was really an amazing job. So.
A sua atuação como David Berkowitz realmente foi incrível. Além da ótima caracterização que fizeram em ti e a maquiagem, de que outras formas você se preparou para interpretar David nessa série?
Yeah, so Kazu, like I said, did all the makeup, and that was like a whole thing on its own. Like that was months of going into Kazu's studio and trying out makeup and prosthetics, and I mean it took 7 hours the first time, probably longer to do it, and then I'd come back and he'd adjust and adjust and adjust, and that was a whole process just to get the makeup and that stuff to feel real and right, and it was really a cool process and something I'll never forget. But other than that, to prepare, I worked with a dialect coach for a few months, just working on the accent. Like I said, it came kind of easy to me, the New York accent, but there was some stuff that I think were more things I had maybe heard in movies or just weren't completely accurate to him or just to New York. And so I just worked with this dialect coach, and we just kind of honed in on the sounds, and I listened to an interview that David did with Larry King, but it was kind of tricky because I was playing a young David Berkowitz, and he's changed so much now. So that definitely made it a little tricky. They didn't want me to play David Berkowitz of 2020 or whatever. They wanted me to play David Berkowitz from 1975 or whatever it was, and or 1980 or whatever it was. I don't remember anymore. But yeah, so that was a lot of work doing, working on the dialect. That was a big part of it, and then also just reading as much as I possibly could about the guy, and just kind of like I read the Satanic Bible, which was something he read. I watched all the horror movies that he was into, or they said he was into. I read a few biographies about him. I watched tons of interviews with him, and just tried to, I guess, understand him. But the problem with a lot of those books and stuff is, and the movies, is they only really talked about the murders, which I didn't really think was, obviously that was a really disturbing part, but I really thought the key to finding the character was actually to tap into what made him a human, and try to understand the guy on a more human level, and not like the psychopath killer. So that was what I really focused on, was just like trying to bring some of myself to the role, in a little way as well. But I put a lot of work into it. I worked with an acting coach as well, and just did as much research as I possibly could. So yeah. And thank you for saying that I was really amazing, and that means a lot. I appreciate that.
A terceira pergunta, Oliver, e que é bem polêmica e que me deixa bem frustrada, recentemente na Netflix saiu um documentário, Os Filhos de Sam. E nesse documentário eles mostraram algumas teorias de que na época poderiam ter mais pessoas envolvidas nos crimes do David Berkowitz. Inclusive mostram uma entrevista em que o próprio David menciona ter feito parte de uma seita, no qual outras pessoas também teriam cometido os crimes, que na verdade não teria sido somente ele. Qual a sua opinião sobre isso? Você acredita que realmente haviam outras pessoas envolvidas, não somente o David?
Not read. I had seen that documentary with what's his name? The Terry something, or Maury Terry, or Terry, I forget, Maury Terry, or whatever the guy who was. I saw the Netflix documentary that just came out, but before that, when I was researching, I had seen the hour-long interview and little documentary on YouTube that Maury, I think his name's Maury Terry, did about David Berkowitz and the possibility that there were other Sons of Sam's or other people from his cult. And it's a tricky one because I had thought about it, and David was sort of all over the place. He said at one point, that dog made him do it, then he retracted that, and then he always was kind of all over the place, and it's sort of hard to know what to believe with these guys. And I do believe that he was involved in a cult, and I do believe some of that stuff, but I don't know. I kind of have to stick with the idea that I think one guy did it. I even the Netflix documentary, I was actually hoping, when I saw that it was coming out, I was like, oh, maybe they have some more information. But it was really all the same information that I had read and seen, back 2-3 years ago when I was working on the role. So I kind of stuck with the more the narrative that Mindhunter chose to do, which was David acted alone, and yes, that's the one I sort of believe, and I think that's the writers and the creators of Mindhunter believe, and I didn't think there was enough evidence in the new documentary for me to be completely changed, but I do think there's some interesting stuff in there that's fascinating, and it was enjoyable to watch, and either way, it's just a tragedy that all those people had to die, so that's kind of where
No início, Oliver, quando o David foi pego, ele afirmou que o cachorro do vizinho dele, do vizinho Sam, estaria possuído por um demônio de 3.000 anos que mandava ele cometer aqueles crimes. Um pouco mais adiante, ele mudou a versão dele, dizendo que ele participava de uma seita e que mais pessoas estavam envolvidas, e que ele acabava matando a pedido dessa tal seita. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, ele mesmo se contradizia, dizendo que ele sentia prazer e por isso ele voltava nas cenas dos crimes, porque ele sentia prazer em reviver aquilo que ele causou. Então isso deixa a gente um pouco confuso e faz a gente pensar que ele não matava porque mandavam, mas sim ele matava porque ele tinha prazer naquilo. Na sua opinião, você acha que David realmente matava por prazer e realmente ele foi um serial killer? Ou ele inventou tudo aquilo pra ficar conhecido, pra ficar famoso?
I kind of think those are the same thing in some way. These guys, and I think a lot of these serial killers, not just David Berkowitz, all these serial killers kind of had a want to be seen and want to be famous, even if they were being driven by a sexuality or a sexual thing, or whatever sort of reason they were doing this, doing the killings. I think that David was no different in that way, that I think he did want to be seen. He was kind of a loner, didn't have a lot of friends, if any, really. Didn't have girlfriends, was kind of abandoned by his body. He felt like he was abandoned by his biological parents. And just a lot of kind of stuff happened in his life that I could see both sides. I could see it being something, like a sexual thing that he was going back. I could also see it as being wanting a want to be seen, and so I think both of those things kind of go hand in hand for not just David, but for most serial killers. All right, well, thanks, Patricia. Appreciate you having me on the show. Hope this was helpful, and much love and peace.
Muito obrigada, Oliver, por participar aqui do canal, por dar o seu relato, por dar a sua opinião nesse caso. Se você gostou desse vídeo, deixa o seu like, compartilha, comenta, se inscreva aqui no canal e não deixem de me seguir lá no Instagram, casos.mistérios. Sempre que surgem novas entrevistas ou novidades, eu sempre posto lá antes. E eu vejo vocês na próxima entrevista. Acho que agora eu já posso falar isso com mais certeza. Tô ficando boa nisso, né? Um beijo.